Joining the show today is one of us by way of being a first-round draft pick in the 1974 WHA draft by the Minnesota Fighting Saints, Minnesota Blue Hawks ownership group, and coaching your Minnesota Wild from 2016 through 2020, Bruce Boudreau. Thanks for jumping on, Bruce.
Hey, it's my pleasure. How are you guys today? Good.
Doing pretty well. You were in Vegas recently for the playoff series there. Just what's your schedule like now? Like, I know you want to stay busy and keep active with the game. Just what's overall been this time been like for you since you've been your last stint in Vancouver?
Well, you know what? I've been actually quite busy. I did a lot of caps pre and post game, and then at the end of the season, they had an alternate feed, which I was doing like the Peyton Manning thing. So I was going from there to TSN in Toronto. Since the trade deadline, I've been working with them, and when I'm not doing that, then I'll go to the New York or New Jersey and do the NHL Network stuff. So I haven't been home much. So that's why we went to Vegas. I think we've been doing this for about 15 or 16 days straight, and I said, okay, we need a little bit of a break here, and so my wife loves going to Vegas, so that we went there for 3 or 4 days and had some fun.
Are you more of a gambler or like a show or going to sports?
I'm more of I lose and then she wins, and so she pays me back the money that she won, so to cover my losses, and it seems like I do okay.
You break even somehow.
I break even, yes.
What's the go-to spot out there on the Strip?
Well, you know what? We've stayed at a lot of different places, but I mean, we were at Mandalay Bay this time. But I mean, we'll play slots, and that's pretty well it. You know what? And it's just as expensive to do that, but we like going to the shows, and we like, this trip we got a chance to see Vegas play a couple times, so that was more important to me. But I mean, like the card games or the table games almost price you out. Like, I mean, you got to play now $20 minimum, $25 minimum, and I get too mad when I lose. So I mean, I just sort of stay away from that.
I think that's why they give the guys debit cards now versus cash on the airplanes for their per diem, so that
yeah,
it's not all gone by the time to get off the plane. So.
I don't doubt it at all.
Well, as you know, this is a Fellowship of the Rink is the playoff of the Lord of the Rings movie, which we're both big fans of. And I was curious, do you have kind of like a nerd itch or nerddom that you like? You collect cards. Are you big into Star Wars? Like, I saw the jukebox behind you. Do you collect jukeboxes? Like, what's your? I guess
if I'm a nerd for anything, it's wrestling.
Yeah. Okay.
I've followed since the early '80s. I guess it's probably even before that, but nobody knew about wrestling. And on Saturday afternoon and in Toronto, you'd watch it on Channel 2, which came from Buffalo, and the guys back there. I mean, that was in the early '70s and '60s. But I mean, I followed wrestling most of my life, and got to meet a few of them recently, and they became like sort of friends. We're not hang out friends, but I mean, guys that text back and forth every now and again. So and when the shows come into Hershey, I always go and watch them, and it's fun.
So that's who was the person you met, a wrestler that you met that were like, maybe you had a little bit of awe factor there? Like,
well, there was Kevin Owens I met in at the Montreal draft, and Jackie Redmond, who works for now does a lot of TV and works for the WWE on Raw. She, her and EJ Raddick sort of surprised me with Kevin coming in, and so I mean, met Adam Copeland a couple times, who's formerly known as Edge in the WWE. Now he's in AEW. But I mean, that's my real thing. I mean, when I was younger, I collected comics, and actually, up to about 15 years ago or 20 years ago, I had an unbelievable collection. But I mean, and ended up selling it. But other than that, it's all sports all the time with me. Baseball in the summer, watching, and hockey all winter long. I watch every game, or as many as I can see, and then football in the fall, college football. I mean, and then I live on a golf course. So, I mean, I'm pretty well into sports stuff.
Man, that's quite the spread. And what was the go-to comic?
Comic?
Yeah.
Spider-Man. I had them all. I had one through 350 at one point, but I started collecting them in the early 60s when Marvel was just coming into play, and I had thousands of them. And the crazy thing is I sold them because we wanted, when I was in Hershey, and crazy thing, I wish to God I hadn't sold them, but I mean, sold them all because we wanted to finish our basement. It was just nothing there, so we had to do it from start to finish, and we didn't want to put a bar in there and everything else. We didn't have the money to do that, so we did it. We sold the comics, completed it, and then 4 days later, I got called up to the Capitals, and at that point, I was so mad because then I could afford it with the raise. So it was crazy.
Crazy timing, man. And we'll talk right now, I guess, about just your transition from coaching into the media, which you've been doing a great job. Like you said, you've already been all over the networks. How tough was the transition from coaching to media, especially considering the locker room language that you frequently threw out?
Well, I don't swear at home or anything. So, I mean, it's been pretty easy to handle. And quite frankly, it started, Sportsnet called me after we lost out in Anaheim to do some of the stuff in Toronto. So I did that for the playoffs. And then all of a sudden the NHL Network phoned when we missed out or when I was done in Minnesota, and they called. And so, I mean, the great thing is, like, I mean, I just talk. It's just me, and like, it's just the knowledge of the game, I guess. And but I mean, I never think of myself as a media person. I still want to coach. So, I mean, I still this is sort of something to keep me involved in the game. Like, I mean, I know I'm getting a little long in the tooth for that, but I feel energetic and young. So I feel if anybody wanted me, I could still do the job. But it's just an extension of talking hockey and talking sports. And to me, that's not difficult. If I had to do any studying, I'd be in trouble. But I mean, with this, I just sort of shoot from the hip a little bit.
Yeah, fair. And are you familiar? I know, like you said, the swearing and stuff, not big outside of hockey, but inside of hockey, everyone knows about it. Became fabled from the HBO series, obviously. Are you familiar with the Nielsen show, TSN, and the Filthy Bruce segment that they would do when you were in Vancouver?
No.
It's basically them spoofing your post-game pressers and adding additional colorful language.
I try not to, whether I was had a great team and was doing well, or had a poor team and or it wasn't doing well, I never looked at myself on the media, I never read anything. So, I mean, all of these things, you've heard about them, but I would never turn them on or do anything of that sort. I mean, I like doing it, but I just don't like, even now, I would never, I just don't like looking at myself doing stuff on TV or video or anything like that. I mean, the thing I've seen myself most of is the HBO thing, where I threw about 40 F-bombs in about 25 seconds. And, what's interesting about that thing is that we knew they were in there all the time, and the HBO people were fabulous. But I had told them after we came in after the second period of that day, I said, can you guys leave? Because, I mean, I knew I was going to give it to the team pretty good. And they said, no, we're allowed to be in here. I said, okay, here goes. And like I've often told, whether I was coaching Minnie or Washington or whatever, I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but I say, listen, boys, I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth right now, but here it goes. And then you start on something and you just build up and it gets into a rant. And like, I mean, I've said some of the stupidest things in these rants. I remember in Mississippi one night, in the East Coast League, I was going, was losing it a little bit, and I said, you got to take the bull by the cows, and the horns got to go somewhere, and they're all looking at me and going like, what the hell is he talking about? And I said, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just talking. Shut up.
Oh man, that's straight out of Tommy Boy. Like, it's got to be the butcher.
Yeah. So anyway, but I'm not worried about the the swearing and that. I mean, there's a place for it, and I mean, let's face it, athletes are, when they're in their private settings, they use those words a lot, and it's the same as if you go to movies. You're not allowed to swear, but every movie has swearing in it. It's like I don't get it. Like, I mean, they start at 8 years old. I remember when they'd say, hey, don't watch Slapshot. Your kids are too young. And now every kid that's 10 years old has seen the movie if you're a hockey fan.
There was a few times in your career where you'd only had maybe a few days in between your coaching jobs, so you didn't really have a lot of downtime in between. But when you had some more time, like, do you do any more studying up on, or shadow anybody, or do anything like that, or is it mostly just kind of just watching the games or talking to people to kind of stay? Because you've been down to the game not very long, so not like you have to like go refresh anything. So
no, I'm pretty sure I'm pretty knowledgeable about the change, and if there's been a change in the game. Like, I mean, I don't have to talk to anybody. I watch all of them. I see the systems, the way they play, and everything else, and they're pretty knowledgeable about that. So, I mean, you're right. This is the longest I've been away from coaching in my life. I mean, or being actually part of either playing or coaching. And so, I mean, it's but if you stay up with the times, I mean, I don't have to study books or anything. I just have to watch and see what's going on to be pretty knowledgeable, whether the changes that have been made in power plays, the changes that have been made in systems, and how it's going back and forth. I mean, it was only 15 years ago that Guy Boucher was in Tampa, and he was doing the 1-3-1, and everybody, matter of fact, Laviolette was there and in Philly, and they stopped the game because they wouldn't advance the puck. Mm-hmm. And now you look at everybody's doing either the 1-3-1, the 1-1-3. It's almost the 1-2-2 in the neutral zone is morphed into something else. And so, I mean, you just got to stay on top of that. It's the same as D zone coverage. Used to be, a lot of zone, and now it's more man to man, where and the defense don't leave the front of the net or don't go above the dots type thing. And that started, I think, more with Bruce Cassidy, and then it went to Jim Montgomery, and Bruce did it in Vegas, and so you see that coming out a lot. So I mean, it's a lot of different things like that. It's that you see changing, but I mean, not different. It used to be on the penalty kill, for example, it was always either a 2-2 or 1-3. Now it's all 1-3s. Like, I mean, and so I mean, it's you see how those things go. I was always studying the power play, so I mean, you try to see when teams are playing in zone, how to break it and how to get around your what they're trying to do. So I mean, watching the game like that, that's what I study.
And what do you think about the other side of the coin, though? Like, obviously, you're very on top of the X's and O's. What do you think about the changes from like your early days getting called up to Washington to what you're seeing now with how to manage this generation of player? Like, a little bit softer is definitely the wrong word, but you can't really be on them the way you used to unless you're John Tortorella out in Philly.
Well, you know what? And that wears thin after a while too. But I mean, and I've never changed in that way. And I've always believed in one thing, that it's my job as a coach to find what I call the Achilles heel on every player. And first of all, you got to get to know them a little bit. And then what might work with some guy doesn't work with the other guy. I mean, some guys might need a kick in the butt. Other guys need a pat on the back. Other guys, earlier on, you could take ice time away or you could find them. But I mean, I got to find what makes that guy tick. Like, I mean, and when I go around the room and talk to them, you look at the guys that if I called out somebody in the room that, I mean, I want them to say, oh yeah, I'm going to show you. And that's what you want from them. That's the reaction. But some guys now, the younger guys, some of them cower. Some of these guys, when they're younger, have not been disciplined at all ever, because from 11 years old or 10 years old, they've been, given everything because they're great players, right? And so, I mean, sometimes they take it a little more difficult. You got to put your arm around them and ask them things. For an example, Mike Green, I found out early on in Washington when I had him in Hershey, that if I went down the bench and I started screaming at him, there was nothing. He was lost for the day. So, I mean, I'd found that I'd have to, if he wasn't doing well, I'd have to go up to him and put my arm around him and say, Mike, I need you tonight. You're not playing very well. He didn't want anybody else to know that I was yelling at him. So, I mean, then you'd have other guys where I really believe, and it's whether now or whether it was 100 years ago, I mean, is something that their whole thought is, I won't care about you until you care about me. So I wanted to get to know, their wife's name, their kids. And for example, one day, Matt Hendricks, who was one of my favorite players ever, he had about 2 or 3 bad practices in a row. And I went up to him and I said, Matt, you're not working. What's going on? This isn't you. And he said, well, I got both my kids have croup. I'm up all night. So I just said, you take 2 days off. Like, I mean, you go take with your kids, and they not only respect that, they say, okay, you're doing that for me, I'm going to go overboard and do something for you. So, I mean, you can call that a player's coach or not. I just call it common sense. Like, I mean, if you want them to play your best, how do I get the best out of these guys? And that's one of the ways. So when you ask the original question, whether you're 20 years old or 35 years old, it's the same thing, getting to know them. I mean, with Pettersson, it was the same. He was like Mike Green. I mean, I got to know him a little bit, and we would talk all the time, and I get to know what he wants and everything else. He felt comfortable telling me these things. So, I mean, you have a great rapport. And I think almost everybody, that was my strength as a coach, is having the rapport with the people or with the players. And I mean, I might not have been the genius in X's and O's or line changes or what, but I knew they would all play hard for me because they knew I would go to bat for them.
It's crazy to look at now, Bruce. Like, there's been 17 coaching changes since the end of last season. Could be more in the coming weeks because of, after the playoffs are over. And I was curious from your perspective, like, what do you think's changed the most or led to the fact that there's so many more, seems like more coaching changes each now than there were maybe 15 years ago, as far as in over a course of a 1 year span? Maybe I'm wrong, but is there something that's maybe more pressure or the salary cap or just expectations?
I just think it's like, I mean, all the owners are so rich. Okay. They saw Bill Foley in Vegas win, and right from the get-go. And so it's a win now league. And listen, coaches make a lot of money as compared to the outside world, but as compared to what players make and the terms of the coaches, very few of them make money that the owners and teams can't absorb because it's not involved in the salary cap, and they're the easiest guys to go. Like, I mean, every team that sort of has their exit meetings, and you can see it every year, that, I mean, if the management, it used to be the coaches just had exit meetings and would report early on to the GM and say, did you find anything out in there in the exit meetings? Now the coaches have exit meetings, the GMs have exit meetings, and if the players say, hey, I can't play for him, it's the coach that goes. And I mean, I think that's happened a little bit this year, even though they won't tell you. I mean, in the exit meetings, if enough of the players show displeasure, or the top player says, hey, I'm going to want out if this guy's back, then the coach is the guy that's going to be gone.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, you talked about wanting to get back into coaching. Obviously, like, this being the landscape that it is, if you're sitting there and evaluating potential coaching opportunities, like, how do you actually go about that evaluation of, like, do I want to actually join this organization or not?
Well, I mean, I don't think in those terms. I think there's 32 jobs, and you should be blessed and lucky if you get any one of them. I mean, I've never chosen when I went to Washington, we were in last place in the league. When I went to Anaheim, they were last place in the league. When I went to Minnesota, they had just come off a really bad year where they at one point they lost 13 or 14 in a row and barely slipped into they had fired their coach 3/4 of the way through. Vancouver, I took over the last place in the league, last place team in the league. So I've never been picky at where I'm going, and it just, you take it and you go, wow, like, I mean, what an opportunity. I mean, you either fear it because you're going into a team that hasn't been doing well, or you think of the positives that can come out of it if you end up doing well. And I've been lucky enough in each of those occasions. The only time I've ever had a losing record, quite frankly, is the last year in Vancouver. And I mean, I could talk about that for about 2 hours, but I think I'd be in a lot of trouble when it would be all over. So, so I'll just keep quiet about that year. But I mean,
next episode, yeah,
yeah, that's like I said once before and got a lot of trouble. That's a chapter in a book that I'll never write.
Let's talk about the positive of that, though. Like, the fans overwhelmingly were on your side as all of that transpired. Like, how cool was it just to see that support from the community?
It was amazing, and I still get it everywhere I go. And I still tell my wife, I can't believe, that the people are still like that supportive of me. And I thought they were amazing. And Vancouver's a tough market, but I mean, it's again one of those things. If you fear the tough market and the tough questions, then you're going to lose. But if you embrace it and think of what can happen if you have success, like, I mean, then it's an awful lot better. And Vancouver it'll always have a place in my heart. I mean, it was a great place. And some of those players that I mean, they got some really good players that were really good people. And a lot of misinformation. When I went there, I was getting calls. Oh, this is a terrible locker room. It's this, it's that. They were great. They were all great.
Well, it reminds me of the fact that what made that situation even more unique was you rarely get to say goodbye to your players or know what's coming, right? Usually if you're a coach, you're probably like, like in Minnesota, you didn't know what was coming, right? Like for Vancouver, you had that time. I guess how emotional was that scene in the locker room when for your last game? Like, I don't know if you can paint a picture of what that was like. Probably surreal thing.
Well, it was really, I mean, unique. And I don't know if it's ever happened in any sport like that, where I knew the day that I was getting fired. I knew the day like 8 weeks before, and it was crazy. But I mean, so when the fans at the end of that game stood up and stayed in the seats and gave me the ovation, and the players all came around the bench and tapped their sticks, and like, it gets pretty emotional. And then very, very few coaches of any sport get a chance to address the team after they know they're getting fired. They haven't been fired yet, but I mean, they know they're getting fired the next day. Because, like, for example, in Minnesota, when Billy Guerin told me, it was right after I had a meeting with the players, and before I was ready to go on the ice when he came in and told me. And then, so you don't want to see anybody there, and then you just leave out the back door, and they'll text you or phone you, and that's great. But here I got to address and thank all the players for everything they did and the support they gave me, and it was great. And then each player, almost to a man, I think that maybe 20 out of the 24 guys came into my office and said goodbye to me privately, and I thought that was pretty amazing. I mean, you can't make that up, or you can't manufacture that. It was just real, So I thought, if you got to go, this is as good a way to go as any.
For sure. And I mean, on the Wild, how crazy was it to be here for a 4-year span, but serve under 3 different GMs? There it is.
It was pretty unique.
Yeah.
A quick story too. Like, there was one one episode when Billy was GM, and we were flying, and I like he lost oxygen or something, and he fell in the plane, and he hit his head on the side, and all I could think of, I can't go through another GM. I mean, we had the doctors and everything up there like this, and he was flying, which was great. But I'm going, another GM? What's going on here?
But he was fine, though. He made it out all right. But
yeah, no, he was fine. I just think that
incredible.
maybe the sudden altitude or something caught him in a different way, and he just sort of fainted. But,
during that stretch, a lot of crazy things happened over that time, but the weirdest had to be the first true, to today at least, expansion draft. Were you involved in those conversations leading up to the 2017 Vegas expansion?
Was I involved? Well, Chuck was the GM back then,
Yep.
and he would tell me the dilemma that we had, and what he, I didn't know in the end what he was going to do, but he knew we had 5 really good defensemen, and that was the core of our team, and that we didn't have very much money on the cap. So, I mean, to stop them from, say, taking Matt Dumba, and I may be wrong on this, I mean, we had to offer up Alex Tuck, who had played only 1 year in the minors, and so they wouldn't take a Matt Dumba, who at that time was, still pretty young, and he was a real up-and-comer, and I think it was the next year he had 12 goals in December until he tore his labrum, and I think it became a little more difficult. He missed the rest of the year, and became a little more difficult for him. But I mean, when you think you had Suter, Spurgeon, Brodin, Scandella, and Dumba, and you were allowed to keep all of them, and then the way we got, we traded Scandella for I think Pominville at that time. But it gave us enough money on the cap to pick up Eric Stahl, which was a great pickup. So it was like as bad as it looked, because you lose out on Alex Tuck. I think Chuck did as good a job as he could in that moment in saving, keeping the same team that he had.
Like the 2 names that will be forever in lore here are Parise and Suter. For good and for, I'm sure, bad if you're a fan, right? Like the moment of hope that they gave, that when they signed and picked Minnesota to be their long-term destination, and then the exit, which they're still paying for with the dead cap hits. Like, you were around those guys. Like, do you understand the reasoning for the buyout, or do you see anything that would make them the team in a better spot in the culture, in the room, by having those guys maybe not there?
Well, I mean, I think it wasn't any conversations that I'd had with anybody, but I think they were looking for younger leadership, and they had just, Eriksson Ek was starting to make his presence aware, and Spurgeon was starting to be great, and they wanted different leadership guys in there. So I think they wanted just to say, okay, we got these guys for, they were supposed to be 13 years. I don't know how many years they bought them out after 8 or 9, but I mean, and they wanted just a different culture of leadership there, because they moved Mikko out, and they got rid of all the 3 guys that were the leaders on the team. And I don't know if Bill had talked to, he didn't talk to me about it, but I mean, I don't know if he had talked to, at that time, whether it was Dean or any of the players, and they thought that this was just a bad fit and we have to make the move now. And I mean, I'm sure, the ownership knew about it and everything else, and they were okay with it. But I mean, I think, they made a great draft that year. I think, or the year before, with Paul Fenton drafted Boldy, and they got Rossi that year. And I mean, those guys are going to be, solid for years to come. And now that they've got Faber, I mean, they got the good young nucleus, I think, of what Billy Guerin was looking for when he made that change.
How do you see the Wild now? Like, obviously, when you fire a coach during the year, you know that there's maybe some underachieving or some frustration there. But you mentioned the young core. Like, where do you see the Wild right now? Like, this kind of who they probably should be while the buyouts are still in play. Like, missing 14.7 million. Should they be more of a playoff team? Like,
Well, I
next
mean,
year?
I think it always boils down to goaltending. I don't care who you are and what team you're with. I mean, if your goaltending is good, and I mean, you're going to usually be in the playoffs. I mean, you look at, I mean, I didn't have the luxury of having Kaprizov, but I mean, you got one of the best players in the world there, and you've got, I think Eriksson Ek has proven he may not be score 40, but every year he surprises you and scores more and plays in every situation, and he's tougher than nails. And I mean, I love the guy. I mean, quite frankly, as far as the player goes, Ryan Hartman has proven that he was, I played him like Chicago did and Nashville did and Philadelphia did, third or fourth line right winger. Now he became a second line center. I mean, out of necessity, and he's still there, and he's having a good career. I mean, Zuccarello, I don't know, what is he, 36 next year or something? I mean, but he can still, and he didn't score as often as he would have liked to this year, but he's still, his chemistry with Kaprizov is still fabulous. Next year you'll have Spurgeon back with Faber and Brodin, and I think the defense will be better overall. So I mean, I don't know if they're going to be a playoff team, but I do think that they've got great character, on that team, and I think they'll be fighting for the playoffs all the time. And that's they just got some good nucleus. Even Marcus Foligno is a great leader and a great team guy. I mean, and you got him if you can use him on the third line, then I think you've got the nucleus of a good top nine forwards. So I mean, it's I don't see them taking a step back. I think they took a step back this year, but I think once the coaching change was made, Boldy became the player that you expect him to be, and so I mean, I think they'll be right up there next year. I don't know how much money they have. I haven't paid attention to that. Whether they can get one or two good free agents to mix in with what they've got, because they're young and they've got experience. And so, I mean, I expect them to be a tough out next year.
Where's Kaprizov in terms of one of the top players in the world in your mind? Like, I got a chance to watch him now 2 years in a row, where like I'm like that wow factor of I think he's a top 10 player, top 10, 12 player in the world.
And if you take away the top 20, the 25 games that he was horrible at the beginning of the year, and he still got 40 plus goals. So, I mean, I got to believe he's a top 10 player. I think there's going to be a time, and it may be as early as next year, where he's going to get 50 plus, and if like their power play is still solid, and they still don't have they used Brock on the point a lot, and maybe that's going to be his spot. Like, I mean, but I mean, it wasn't that spot until Spurgeon got hurt. But I mean, they got the nucleus. I mean, Ek in front of the net, Kaprizov, Zuccarello. I mean, they got a great Boldy in the bumper. They can have one of the best power plays in the league. So I don't understand, or I don't see why it shouldn't be where they're one of the better power plays. And Kaprizov is not a 50 goal, if he stays healthy, is not a 50 plus goal guy next year.
I mean, don't draw up the exact X's and O's, but like talking about that group and the strengths of the different players, like what would Bruce Boudreau look at and say, like, here's what I really want to do to try and get the best out of those guys on the power play?
Well, I mean, here's what you do is just think of the five guys. Think, first of all, I mean, Zuccarello is not a shooter. He's a passer. Okay. Kaprizov, I would probably have on the half wall, Zuccarello on his forehand, so he could give Boldy the puck in the middle. And Ek is as good a front man. He takes a shit kicking and just keeps coming back at you. Like, I mean, he's the perfect forward, and he never complains. He's in better shape than anybody. So, I mean, you got all the things there. Like when I was in Vancouver, and you had Bo Horvat in the middle, and you had JT Miller on the forehand, and he could come down with a great shot, or he could fake it and give it to Bo. And Bo had 31 goals before I got let go and before he got traded. So, I mean, I see that like that because Boldy's that kind of shooter there. And so, I mean, you just see the makings of a really good power play. And Kaprizov, when he gets it, if you think of McDavid, and McDavid never stays in one place. If Kaprizov has the puck, he could go behind the net and around the net and around and find open guys. And the minute you take your eye off Zuccarello, he'll shoot the puck. A little bit like if you think of Kucherov in Tampa, who, you know, I mean, he's got Point, Hedman, Stamkos and he's a playmaker, and the puck, it runs through him. So, I mean, but if you take your eye off him, he's shooting the puck in the net. And I see Minnesota having a power play like that.
We would love that. And I'm going to do some zigzagging here, but you talked about Bo Horvat. He's over on the island now, and his new coach, Patrick Waugh, I just need you to talk me through what's going through your mind when he is banging on the glass, coming over and looking for blood.
Well, first of all, fear is going through my mind. I mean, I didn't even know. One of my assistants had to tap me on the shoulders and say, you know, Patrick is coming after you right now. And because it was so stupid. It was his first game ever coaching in the NHL. And they were leading, I think it was 5-0. We scored a goal. Jacob Silverberg scored a goal with 5 seconds to go in the game to make it 5-1. The game was over. And I didn't think. I just let the same group. It was Bolesky, maybe Koivu and or Saku Koivu and Silverberg on the ice. And Matt Bolesky would fight you, but I mean, he wasn't a heavyweight by any stretch of the matter. And that's just 5 seconds, stay on the ice. And he throws some tough guys out there, and the puck comes over to the boards, and they start pushing us after the whistle. And Corey Perry was there squirting water on them, and I think that got Patrick going, and he pushed the glass over. And once I found out, I got to protect my players, and started screaming back at him. And then I saw his eyes roll back in his head, and I go, "Uh-oh, hold on, glass, stay strong."
Yeah. Do you talk to him after that? Did you ever patch up afterwards, or
I met
have
him
a conversation?
the next year at the draft, and he said he apologized for losing it, or it was a couple years later. But I mean, hey, no worries, Patrick. It's all part of the game, you know.
Another guy you know well, you mentioned Russian superstar Kaprizov, and I'm sure you coached a lot of goals out of Ovechkin in your time there. Getting closer to an all-time record. I know much was talked about. Russo talked to you a bit for a story about Ovechkin in his playoffs. Is it close to father time with him catching up, or is it just more so of some guys just have a rough playoffs? It's just even the best of them.
Everybody has a bad portion, a bad playoff, a bad season. I mean, maybe Gretzky was the only one that never had a bad year. But I mean, I think Alex learned a lot this year, and I think he'll come back better next year. I think maybe he realizes that once you're getting a little older, you have to maybe work a little harder in the summer because everything came so easy. And now I have no idea. I'm just guessing on this thing. But I mean, he saw how his year went. I'm sure he wasn't 100% happy, even though he got 31 goals. But I mean, he's a really smart individual, and he'll say, okay, I got to do this better and that better. And he'll train accordingly to get those spots better. So, I mean, it was a little tough for him, but I also had Timu. When Timu, my first year and second year in Anaheim, was our leading scorer. But by his third year, when he was 44 years old, sometimes you just get old, it just happens overnight almost that you can't do what you did in the year previous. So, I mean, I don't know if it's going to, if it happened this year to Alex or if he can readjust. I'm hoping he can readjust. He's too great a person and too good a guy that he's fought for 19 years to do this, and hopefully he can get it done next year. It'd be a tough task to score 42 next year, but I mean, at least get close enough that he can go one more year. I think he's got 2 years left on his deal.
Do you think he's got the right cast around him right now, or is that not even a factor when you're talking about a guy like Ovechkin?
Well, I mean, to me, they have to change the power play a bit. It became way too stagnant, and I think they need maybe one more offensive weapon. I think it really hurt when Nicky couldn't play this year, and Kuznetsov didn't, whatever problems he had didn't work well. That became, because when you think about it, like, I mean, if Dylan Strome was your third line center after those two, if I'm looking at it in September, I'm going, hey, we've got a pretty good squad here, and pretty good offensive when you think, okay, Oshie, if he's healthy, and Wilson and Alex, and now you get Pacioretty, and you're going, yeah, we're a little old, but these are all offensive weapons, and it just didn't work out. But I would venture to guess that they'll get 3 or 4 guys up from Hershey next year, like they did this year, and they were all good players when you're looking at McMichael and Protas and Blake Mallenstein in the defense, because Hershey's team is by far the best team in the American League. So, I mean, they'll graduate a couple players, I'm sure. So if they've got a little bit of money, if they can do the right moves at the right positions, I think that they will really try to get a centerman that would really help Alex out, and I think that would be great.
Who's your Stanley Cup pick now that you've seen the first part of the playoffs? Who's the team to be?
It's you know what? I'll tell you who I was. I originally had Colorado against Florida in the end, but I was so, and I mean, obviously I love George McPhee and would like Vegas to do really well. But I'll tell you, when I saw Game 3 in Vegas, the speed of that Dallas team impressed me so much. Like, I mean, if it wasn't for Logan Thompson, that might have been a 9-2 game. But I was going, wow. Like, I mean, things happen in such a hurry for those guys. And, now that it's 3-2 Dallas, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. I think Vegas will win the next game, and then Game 7, who knows? But one of those teams are really good, and I didn't think Colorado would have such an easy time with Winnipeg, but they did. And so Edmonton looks like just a wagon right now defensively, and if you give them a chance on the power play, I mean, it's lights out. And usually what happens in the playoffs, as the rounds go on and on, you get less and less penalties. So, I mean, that's, if you just look at history, I mean, that's what happens. So I don't know if they'll how they'll do, but I mean, it's going to be Carolina, the Rangers. I haven't mentioned those two. Those two teams are great, and let alone, I mean, I still believe Boston's going to win. I don't think they could do this again 2 years in a row. But I mean, and with Matthews not playing tonight again, but boy, would that make a storyline if the Leafs win or lose, it's going to be a storyline. Let me tell you that.
Yeah.
How does it affect the Leafs?
Yeah. I was just in Tampa, Bruce, for exit interviews, and talking about signing Stamkos and Hedman, and you've seen all the teams over the years, the Kings and Blackhawks and Penguins, go through the cup runs and kind of go that inevitable decline. Do you think Tampa still has some of that group where they can make another run at it? I don't think you can see anything that compares to what you've seen maybe than the teams that I just talked about, the Penguins and like the Blackhawks and like that went through it.
Yeah, I mean, Hedman's in his 30s now. I mean, Vasilevsky, we keep talking about him, but I mean, it's been 2 years there. I thought he's been pretty normal now. And is that the norm, or is he's going to get, this year with the whole summer of training? We still think everybody still thinks he's the best in the world, but to me, my jury's out. Let's see. Kucherov is 30, but he's still so good. I love Braden Point. Stamkos is as good a power play guy as you're going to have, but I think he's limited, quite frankly, if the power play isn't successful for him. I mean, I hope he signs with Tampa, and he deserves to be there his whole career, and he's been incredible there. But I mean, time will tell. But I mean, their third and fourth line and the bottom three defensemen have really got to be improved upon for them to stay at the level I think that they want to stay at.
Well, you're a big golfer, Bruce. I wasn't sure if you are or not.
Well, I'm big, and I golf. I mean,
okay.
Aren't we all? Yeah.
Let's kick our final question here from
I live on a golf course too, so I mean, it's I'm out there all the time.
So no excuses, right?
No excuses.
So last question here from our friends at Waggle Golf. Get your waggalon.com promo code SP10 to take 10% off. Bruce, dead or alive, don't care if they're in sports, entertainment, whatever.
Or wrestling.
Yeah, it's going to be 3 wrestlers. Yeah. Who's in your dream golf foursome?
Oh, really? Okay. That's interesting. You got to give me a chance to think for a second.
Yeah.
But one would be Mickey Mantle. One would be Jim Brown, and I have to think of maybe Jack Nicklaus. I mean, those would be 3 guys that I've admired in everything they've done. Mickey Mantle growing up was, being a Yankee fan, was my favorite ball player. Jim Brown, growing up, Cleveland was my favorite team, still are. I've suffered many years with them, believe me. But I mean, and I got an autographed jersey from him, from a Cleveland jersey. So that's hanging up in my house. So that's that. And Jack Nicklaus just was the greatest golfer. If we're golfing, I mean, it would make sense. And him or guys like it would be him, or like I'm more into the older guys. Like, I mean, Ben Hogan, Arnold Palmer, those guys would be going. But as it turns out, I was allowed to pick who I could play with at the Tiger Woods Pro-Am, like when my second year in Washington. And the guy that got me at it said, you could pick Phil, you could pick anybody. I mean, you could pick Tiger, but then Tony Romo came in, and I couldn't pick Tiger anymore. But I picked Mike Weir because he was Canadian, and he just won the Masters. So I mean, they're going, you do all this, and you pick Mike Weir, and I said, well, I'm proud Canadian, yeah.
So who's riding in the cart with you?
Like at that time?
No. Who's going to ride in the cart with you for your foursome there?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'd have to go to a hockey player and be Bobby Orr,
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
When you got to pair up with your fellow Canadian for that Pro-Am, like any crazy Canadianisms or any stories swapped that are noteworthy?
Well, here's the story. Okay. And I know you got to go here, but so when I found out I'm playing with Mike Weir, and we were playing in the group directly behind Tiger, but we played the first hole together. So I made the Caps go get me 2 signed Ovechkin jerseys. And so met Tiger, and I said, Tig, Alex Ovechkin signed jersey. Would like to, on behalf of the Capitals, give it to you. And here's the difference. He said, oh, thanks. And he stuffed it in his hockey bag, right? Or his golf bag. And I went, okay. And then Mike Weir came up, and I said, Mike, on behalf of the Caps, I'd like to give you a hockey jersey. Now, Tiger's never really been a hockey fan, but Mike Weir's Canadian and has been. And he just went, oh, my God. And then he told his caddy, he says, you go put this in the back seat of my car. Don't put anything on it. Nothing. I want that like that. And I went, all right, that's it. So
love that. And then Tiger, you see him later. He's like cleaning divots off his club.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I did. We played the first hole together at Congressional, and the 10th. We started on the 10th. It used to be, it's the 10th. There's a par 3 over water, and he put it in the water. I put it on the green. And 2-putted, and I told him as he was leaving, I'm 1 up. You want to play? And he just gave me the sneer and went away.
And talk trash with the best of them. There you go. So
Love
I
it.
mean, he hit from about 80 yards behind me. I mean, they play the pros, we play the up tees. But I mean, that I don't usually tell in the story.
No, we'll delete that. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it, and thanks to Crystal for helping with the audio there too. But
No problem.
looking forward to seeing you on NHL Network.
Hope I didn't bore you to death. So you guys have a great day.
No, never.
You too.
Appreciate it, Bruce.
Okay, bye bye.